Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life with Sterling Fox on AM 650.
Always a real pleasure to have these two characters in studio for an episode of Boomer Life. They are our friends from Next Gen and Mainland Hearing. The president of the company is Mark Hambley, and the head audiologist is Dr. Ted Venema, a very animated professional who we enjoy very much on this program. We're talking hearing and hearing aids specifically. And Mark, Ted, and I have broached this subject in the past.
Yes.
But let's really get into it in some detail.
Right.
Because, as you said, only 1 in 5 Canadians ever does anything about their hearing problems.
Right.
So that's 1 out of every. So 4 out of 5 of us are walking around to the end of our earthly days, unable to hear particularly well, and that's, I guess, kind of okay. And the reason for that, the reason that so many of us opt out, is because many of us are intimidated by the costs. We may not even know what those costs are, but I'll bet you they're really expensive, so who needs that stuff? I don't want to spend my money on that.
Yes.
And that's the end of that.
Yep.
How weird is that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a misperception, unfortunately, on the part of the average consumer, because no one at either Mainland Hearing or Next Gen Hearing is ever turned away without being provided with some form of amplification if they want it for the sake of their income range.
Okay.
So there's lots of ways we can go about this to ensure that somebody gets amplification and they get back into life again and start enjoying those activities that they used to participate in, those social activities that they struggle with because of their hearing loss. We can reintroduce them back into those with a lot of success and a lot of enjoyment again. And for those people who really don't have the money to purchase hearing aid, there are other alternatives. There's a Lions Club, for example, that we work with, and a number of other dispensing organizations work with that provide a subsidy. There's 2 forms of subsidy they provide. Number one is that they can get a used hearing aid. They have this lab down in Bellingham. They take all these donated hearing aids. We have in our office, and a number of other dispensers have a little box in our office that if you have, let's say you trade your old hearing aids
sure.
you can donate those hearing aids to the Lions Club, and they will actually take those hearing aids down to their Bellingham lab, ensure that they refurbish them, do whatever they need to make sure they meet the quality control standards that we require to fit someone with.
Right.
And we can take that set of hearing aids and we can fit them to an individual for nothing, to that individual.
Right.
And the Lions Club pays us a small fitting fee for doing so.
Mm-hmm.
But they also have a program. That's the first option. The other option, which is really where they're trending towards now, is we have an arrangement with them, and there's one other organization that does as well, where we can take new hearing aids. And these are fairly good, sophisticated technology, and we can fit these individuals at no charge to them, and the Lions Club will pay for the cost of those hearing aids. And we give them those hearing aids at a very reduced price, because obviously these are people who would normally not be able to get a hearing aid because of the cost.
Right.
So the nice thing about that for the Lions and for us as well is that those hearing aids come with a 3-year warranty, provision of batteries, loss and damage insurance, those sorts of things. So the Lions didn't have to worry about servicing or those things breaking down for some time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the route they prefer, and I think we prefer as well. So that's one form of subsidy that
with the service clubs.
With a service club,
right, sure.
And those are people who obviously are in income levels where they just precludes them from purchasing a hearing aid.
Right. Now you mentioned very briefly in our opening segment, Mark, that in some provinces, and you've mentioned Ontario specifically, some government assistance is available to citizens who want to purchase hearing aids.
Yes.
As you indicated, that subsidy level in British Columbia, however, is 0.
Non-existent.
And is that for children, seniors, for all classes and ages of people, or no assistance for anybody in BC?
There is. There's now just recently, it used to be up to about 3.5 years. If you were a child, you would get assistance through the government.
Sure, right.
And that's recently, I understand, has gone up to the age of 5. But after that, you're on your own.
Interesting.
Now, there is one other exception, and that's people who are covered under Ministry of Social Services. They also are covered if they're employable. So they want these people back to work,
sure.
And so they will cover the cost of hearing aids in those cases as well. And we do that work with the ministry. We will fit hearing aids to those individuals who qualify.
And of course, Ted, there are many corporate insurance benefit providers in many workplaces that will offer some subsidy on a once or every second year.
That's right.
There's a few $100s available for glasses, for hearing aids, and for other
and
such implements.
Not to be forgotten is WorkSafe BC,
right?
or Veterans Affairs Canada, or
right.
Absolutely.
So you have some general wider insurance providers, but then again, your own employer can also defray the costs, your insurance that you might have.
Okay, now you mentioned, Mark, that seniors particularly are obviously the most likely to be affected by hearing loss.
Yes.
It's an aging thing.
It is, yes.
And yet, correspondingly, there's no provision for seniors in British Columbia on the part of the government to offer any assistance with respect to hearing aids.
That's correct. Not through the BC medical plan.
Okay.
As Ted says, certainly if you're an individual that's worked in high-level noise industry, then you're covered under WorkSafe BC. If you were in the forces, you're covered under DVA. So. But and if you're also First Nations are covered as well.
Mm-hmm.
But any other senior is not. There is no subsidy, unlike other provinces in Canada, where they will provide up to $1,000 for a pair of hearing aids in Ontario, or for example, Alberta's are up to $900.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, you said a pair of hearing aids.
Yes.
Do hearing aids? I know we have 2 ears. I get that.
Yes.
Do hearing aids always come in pairs, or sometimes does a person only need one?
Oh, indeed. There are times when, for example, that you may only have a hearing loss in one ear, right? So we'd only fit you with correct the hearing in that one ear. The other ear is normal.
Right.
And some in the old days, when I say the old days, because I've been at this for 40 years now, that you would find that most people would wear only one, because that's all people thought that they needed. But they didn't, with the further research in the anatomy and physiology of how the auditory system works, is that, the right ear, you get a certain portion of the auditory signal going to the left hemisphere of the brain and certain to the right, and the same on the other ear.
The reverse in the other
ear.
Right.
And there's some major benefits to hearing out of both ears. And so as time went on, we realized that, you can localize sound if you use two ears and you hear equally well in those ears.
Sure.
If you only fit the one ear and the sound came from your left and you had a hearing aid in your right, you'd look over here and yet the sound's coming from your left and you'd look right. So, there's big advantages. You get a much better signal to noise ratio. The brain can discern speech in noise much better when you use 2 ears. Lots of benefits in using both ears if you have a hearing loss in both ears.
And most hearing loss does occur in both ears.
Yeah, I suspect
elderly losing hearing due to age, one ear doesn't age faster than the other.
Right.
But unlike eyes, you can have a very different lens for each eye. Usually hearing loss in the elderly, which is called presbycusis, hearing in the aging, occurs similarly in both ears.
Yeah. Okay.
And as Mark says, people used to take the Colonel Klink approach, just a monocle, like it's just wearing one hearing aid. I need a hearing aid.
Yeah.
But now the efforts of the ability to listen to speech in background noise is greatly improved with 2 hearing aids as opposed to 1.
And one of the other things you pointed out, in addition to being intimidated by the price, without perhaps in many cases even knowing what the actual dollar figure is, the other thing, the inhibitor that keeps some people from going for hearing aid assistance is the look of the darn things.
Yes.
Big old plastic thing stuck on the back of your ear. Yeah. I mean, you could see it. There's a guy with a hearing aid. He's 2 blocks down. He's on the other side of the street. That's how you feel when you're wearing it. It doesn't look that obvious, but you feel that way.
Yep.
Well, all of that clunky external technology is gone.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It is. There's so many options available today for people that cosmetically are so acceptable. I mean, it's hard to tell these days if an individual, with the open ear technology we have, and with the lyric, which is one that fits deep inside the ear,
right?
It's very, very difficult to even know that somebody's wearing a hearing aid these days. So, that stigma, that consideration. Really is no longer valid. If you are really interested in improving your hearing and getting back and enjoying those things that you've given up because of your hearing loss, it couldn't be a better time. Technology, the advances in technology have been amazing.
Well,
just amazing.
Cosmetics is no longer an issue.
Yep.
But even on the flip side,
yep.
People wear ear gear all the time now these days, Bluetooth
That's
technology.
Right.
So in a way,
you see people walking down the sidewalk with a thing stuck in their ear, waving their hands and having an animated conversation.
Exactly.
With someone, you hope. So we're used to things with people walking around with devices in their ear. And the other part of that, and I speak now from personal experience, I went to Dr. Lee over at Mainland's Metrotown location for my hearing test. And Dr. Herman Lee is a very nice man.
Yes, he is.
Very smooth, very professional.
Yes.
So he does my case workup. We go through all of the testing process.
Yes.
And then we sit down about 2 feet away from each other and we discuss my results.
Yes.
And in the process of all of this, and I'm 2 feet away from him.
Yep.
And at one point or another, he reaches into both his ears and produces hearing aids.
Yes.
I could not tell, sitting 2 feet away from the man, that he had one, let alone 2 hearing aids.
Yes.
They were absolutely invisible.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So I thought, wow.
Yep.
I didn't even have a clue.
Yep. Yeah.
So
most people don't.
That's
today.
the technology. That's the advancements that hearing aids in 2014 have accomplished.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So, Ted, when we've talked about pricing in the past, once the prescription is determined, the testing procedure is over, the results are in, now you know there's a hearing problem, and here's the range where the difficulty exists. So then this type of hearing aid would likely be best suited for you. Now we have price level A, B, or C with this particular product line. Is that an expediency? Is that a consumer thing, with A being just this? Are they all the same, or does one more expensive deliver slightly better, and the most expensive even better still?
Well, it's you want to discuss the person's lifestyle and what he or she might need, not necessarily even just want. I mean, styles of hearing aids, some are all in the ear, some are behind the ear. So that's one thing. Manual dexterity. How well can they handle changing the batteries?
Okay.
Do they need a little tiny handle to pull the aid out of the ear at night? Or not? All these things. You have to look at the whole gestalt, the whole person. And you discuss the person's financial abilities as well.
Right.
There's usually, like the good old Olympics, the gold, the silver, and the bronze.
Right, sure.
You've got about 8 different manufacturers of hearing aids in the world. There's
and you
only
used
about
to work
8.
for it.
I used to work for one of them, a Canadian one.
Yeah. So you know this business from the ground up, don't you?
Well, I know a few people.
So each level of pricing, though, obviously brings with it a quality improvement.
It's basically, how are they going to handle background noise?
Okay.
So when you're working, the simplest hearing aids are great amplifiers, and we can discuss some of that too, because all hearing aids use a thing called compression.
Okay.
Which is really cool, because people with hearing loss can't stand loud sounds any more than people with normal hearing. So the floor is elevated; they can't hear, but the ceiling of loudness tolerance is the same as normal.
Okay.
So hearing aids have to amplify soft sounds by a lot, and they've got to amplify loud sounds by less and less and less.
Right.
So it takes a technology. That's partly why hearing aids cost what they do, because they're constantly and instantly changing the amount by which they amplify. So if I'm speaking like this, they're working hard. But if I start to talk loud, they'll automatically get weaker.
Right.
So it's kind of like a sponge, like a they call it compression. You get more expensive hearing aids; they'll have better ability to handle with their microphones picking up sounds in one direction versus sounds from all around. They'll have more sophisticated digital algorithms, they call it, for handling background noise, for distinguishing the difference between speech and noise. And now some hearing aids even communicate with each other. So they'll be talking to each other. It's really...
And there's now, because you mentioned this in the past also, Ted, there are hearing aids that are connectable to iPhones and other digital technology.
Absolutely. iPad, iPods, iPhones, now all just, it's de rigueur. They all communicate with hearing aids now. Mm-hmm. It's becoming quite seamless.
Okay.
So it's a trip.
Well, now this and this is an important conversation to have. And if Mark, it's so good to have you back with us too, because this is the dollars and cents conversation. This is the conversation about why 4 out of every 5 Canadians with hearing problems does nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is why. Because we're intimidated by numbers in many cases which we don't even understand.
Yep.
We'll get into this even deeper when we return on Boomer Life, right here on AM 650.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on AM 650.